Welcome. You are entering CCNA's studio in STEM City, USA. CCNA is committed to equity in education, social justice, and health.
We are sending you signals every day.
We are sending you signals every day.
We're sending you signals every day.
We're sending you signals every day.
I'll be feeling sad, but you're too busy to notice.
We are sending you signals every day.
I'll tell you that I'm feeling afraid,
But you'll just tell me everything's okay.
I'll get real angry about something, but you'll take it personally.
We are sending you signals every day. My grades will drop.
And you'll yell at me for not trying.
I stopped caring about how I look.
And you didn't even notice.
We are sending you signals every day.
I don't see my friends anymore.
And you think it's good that I'm always home.
We are sending you signals every day.
I'll tell you, I wish I could go to sleep and never wake up.
And you tell me to stop staying up so late.
We are sending you signals every day.
I need you to look.
I need you to listen.
And ask me if you can help.
Good morning. I'm Jim Page from CCNA. And first, let me thank you for spending some time with us this morning. Our subject today is children and mental health. And that video kind of set the stage for what we want to talk about. But before we get started, I want to share a couple of facts with you. One, about 20% of our children suffer from mental health. That's an alarming rate, and it's probably worse than that. So as we go through the morning, I want to talk about what we can do as a community to address the issue, and then come together to make sure that our kids are in a better place. We're really fortunate today to have two wonderful guests with us, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then I'll come back to you before we get started. I'm going to start with Andrea first. Please come on screen and introduce yourself, Andrea.
Hello, I'm Andrea Grant. I am COO of Creating Healthier Communities, or CHC for short. We're based right in Alexandria on the waterfront. I am a special needs mom, and I have been a caretaker of both my son, who is now 26, and then my father, who was a disabled veteran, both of whom have worked daily to manage their mental health. And by default, I have done the same. So I'm pleased to be here, and I look forward to the discussion.
Andrea, before I bring Cedric on, could you talk about your flyer real quick, and then I'll come back to you?
Absolutely. So we live in an age now where everything is microwavable, as I call it, Colonel, meaning we want everything at our fingertips. So what we created at CHC is the flyer that you're seeing here. There is a QR code that individuals can scan. You can bookmark it, you can save it, you can share it with others. And what it will do is it will link you to DC, Maryland, Virginia area resources that all connect to mental health or health in some way, shape, or form. It will never go away, so you can keep it forever. And we hope that you utilize it. And as we add more partners to our federation, those will be added to the scan code and flyer as well.
Thank you. I'm going to come now to CW. Sir, come on screen, please. Good morning, Cedric.
Good morning, all. Cedric Wilson, Executive Director for Diagnostic Imaging, Anatomic Pathology, and Lab, and one of the Senior Executives for Leadership Development at Stanford Medicine Children's Health. It is a pleasure to be here this morning in the presence of all of the esteemed panelists, and greetings to everyone on the call. So happy Saturday morning.
Yeah, one alibi. Cedric and I are good friends, and he's also a veteran. So Cedric, thank you for who you are and what you continue to do with our veterans. We're going to talk about veteran suicide before you go home today, so be prepared to share some wisdom with us on that. Why don't we get started though with Andrea, share your thoughts with what we're doing, and then we'll go from there, and then we'll come back to Cedric. So Andrea, over to you.
Sure. So my thoughts on what you're doing is encouraging and really needed. I wish, Colonel, that I had these types of resources and relationships as my son was growing up and we were managing through our challenges. Even what you're doing with the church is critically important. Everybody needs somebody, right, and somewhere to go to learn more about this. And as the video showed, it shows up in different ways, right? My stomach hurts. I have a headache, oh, I'm scared to take this test, whatever that is. So it shows up in my son. It always showed up in what adults call behavior, which a lot of times can be really medical symptoms, right? Headache, tummy ache, that kind of thing. The other thing that would show up for him, Colonel, would be in his sleeping or eating patterns. So we do see things, we just need to pay attention to them. And we need to be very cautious as to how we call them out, right? People are already probably feeling uncomfortable or uneasy, or even I'm scared about what they're feeling and seeing. But it is on us to help them recognize that and get the help and resources that they need, like we heard in the video.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to you, and I want you to talk about what you're doing specifically around children in the community outreach. I'll come back to you. Cedric, your thoughts about where we are with the state of our children.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, Colonel, what your program is doing, and Andrea said it perfectly, right? The only thing I'll add to that is I think if I think back when I was growing up in my neighborhood, in the village, if you will, that helped to raise me, I think at some point over the years that perhaps got lost. What I'm encouraged about, in fact, motivated, is programs like yours, Colonel, and the entire staff that you have, and the awareness, as Andrea said, that is upon us and that we must hear, see, and listen about, right? And so I'm committing, all my kids are grown. I'm fortunate enough to have grandkids, 2 grandkids, but I tend to want to devote, when I'm not working, when I'm not with my family, causes such as this to try to raise the awareness and share stories and commit in any volunteering way to help kids. What I do believe is they're our future, right? And they are sending signs and signals when they need help. And we just need to be aware of what they are and do a paradigm shift on how we were raised and how we thought about and conceived around what we think and how we need to raise them, but more so listen to them and see where they are and meet them there.
I'm going to come back to you in a minute, Cedric. But what I'd like for you to do, Andrea, is talk very briefly about the 2 things that you and your organization are doing around kids and mental health, those specific programs that address teens particularly. And if you could touch too on the demographics of those kids, just 2 things, please.
Sure. So we work very closely, Colonel, with APAF, right? So that's the American Psychiatric Association Foundation, to bring education and awareness across different communities, even at the teen level. One of our board members sits on the Saks Fifth Avenue Foundation. They focus solely on mental health. And so what we're doing in the communities are providing information, educational forums like this. We also connect people to wraparound services. It is one thing, Colonel, to get a diagnosis and to be accepting or not accepting of that. The other part of that is that then you have to take action. That is where we come in specifically, as we have the trust within those communities to help bridge or intersect what they have versus what they need, even if they don't realize that they need it. So we are that convener, we're that bridge, that connector between what they are maybe afraid of or have misinformation or whatever about, to what they need to have and how they can access it.
Let me stop you for a minute. You say we are. Describe the we in the CHC. Who are you and what do you do?
Sure. So we are a small but mighty organization. We have about 40 staff, believe it or not. We work nationwide. But when I say we, it is like Cedric said, we have a village. We touch over 5,000 nonprofits a year. We have about 70 Fortune social impact leaders on our corporate leadership council. And then we have over 20 leaders like Cedric, right? He's not on our board yet. Give him a little wink and nod there, Cedric. But we have critical leaders like him on our board, Colonel Page, that give their time, energy, money, resources to, again, bring education, awareness, but also that connectivity piece. It's fine to go to the doctor if you have a headache and they say, oh, Colonel Page, you should be taking this pill. But if you can't afford the pill or don't know how to take the pill or can't even get to the pharmacy to take the pill, then what is the point? So that's what I mean by the we, is that it is a village of us working together collectively every day. And we invite anybody who wants to join us to continue to break down these barriers.
One more thing. You guys are new here in the city. Talk about that very briefly.
Sure. So CHC has been around for almost 70 years. We've been headquartered in Alexandria, North Fairfax Street, right on the waterfront for about 4 years. And so we are having a concerted effort on bringing the national resources that we've been providing across the U.S. here to the DMV. And so that's where you and your organization, Colonel, have been really important and helpful to us, is to bring, it's kind of that whole, like, I grew up in Virginia, right, or the DC area. I haven't gone to all of the museums, right? And that's kind of a thing that we laugh about people is, oh, you have this right in your backyard and you don't use it. Well, we can't have that excuse at CHC anymore. Everything we're doing in other communities, we now need to bring home.
Good. Let me come to Cedric. Cedric, your thoughts about what Stanford is doing around teens' mental wellness versus mental health?
Yeah, so it's a great question. One, I'll go back to my previous statement, is that I don't think any of us are doing enough, but I will share, Colonel, with you a couple of things at Stanford Medicine Children's Health. Stanford consists of 3 entities: Stanford University, Stanford Hospital Adult, and then Stanford Medicine Children's Health. So for us, it's direct and personal, right? There's one thing to have a clinical diagnosis, as Andrea said, about a chronic disease, a chronic illness. There is now new study that talks about social ills that falls in the category of chronic illnesses now. And so there's tons of research that Stanford is doing in specific categories around kids. And I'll just name or I'll reference the fact that the focus is around this social media impact that it's having on kids as young as 2 years old. So there are studies, and the studies include the work in functional studies, which is my part. As I say, diagnostic imaging, so functional MRI, they are using to understand kids' thinking and behaviors through obviously their activity in their brain, and that is scanned and reiterated into an algorithm in MRI. Where I think society is and where our most challenges are is social media and how, as a parent, right? The position of is not to take social media out of your kids in the various age groups' lives, right? It's almost impossible to do that. But how do you come to an agreement with them, measure and monitor them, and then create an atmosphere where it is socially acceptable for them, because all of their friends, if not most of them, are doing it. So how do you reach an agreement, which is a paradigm shift, I think, for parents, right? Reaching agreements with a 5-year-old, reaching agreement with a 10-year-old, right? When some of us as parents think we know best. And technology is moving at warp speed, as all of us know. And so those studies are being done to understand and hear from kids around those attention disorders, right? That is affecting them as they try to learn, as they try to cope, as they try to live, as they try to make some decisions about what makes them happy and unhappy.
So let me stop you for a minute. You mentioned kids. What age kids are we talking about?
So Stanford is doing studies from kids 1 year old all the way up to as a myth, right? Stanford Medicine Children's Health, the thought is that we probably only see kids until they're 18. Mm-hmm. The continuum of care lasts throughout their lifetime. So to answer your question, it's from 1 year old to 30 years old.
I want to be true to our audience. Here in Alexandria, we've got a pretty aggressive program, several programs around mental health. How would you take what you're doing at Stanford and make it part of our toolkit? Or can you envision coming to Alexandria and meeting with our guys and say, hey, look, let's try this at one of our schools or pick a neighborhood, and keeping in mind that we have such a diverse population in our city. We've got probably 16 or 20 different languages. So I'm going to ask you at some point to come here and bring your toolkit with you. How do you see that working?
I say when.
Okay.
You tell me when and I'll come. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head, right? Stanford patients come from worldwide, right? Right. So the challenge at times is the language barrier, right? The parents communicating to the parents what care their kids are going to receive. What's missed and is a top focus now is exactly what we're talking about, the behavior of the kids versus the chronic conditions. I feel fairly confident to say we have some of the best scientists and clinicians in the world, right? So
you probably can say that, yeah, I'm sure you can, yeah.
Yeah, and there's data to prove that, but they do that well. We're trying to close the gap, i.e., bridging, right, is the behavioral portion of it, learning from different cultures, from different environments, from other parts of the world. How do we best, as a whole, communicate with them that therefore transfers into the kids and how the kids think, right? There's a huge phobia about when they come to the United States, right, for care.
Okay.
We have families from all over the world, right? Is the perception that because they don't speak our language, their care will be less than. And to take it even further, we have kids who want to communicate how they're feeling, what their challenges are, but they won't do it in front of their parents.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So all of those. So I welcome the opportunity to come and speak to that because I think we have a global issue.
Well, not just come and speak, but I'm inviting you, as we talked about at least 20 times before, is to become part of our network here in the city. We've got some really, really strong advocates for mental health, and we're looking at not just the kids, but the whole family. So give some thought to that. Andre, I'm going to come back to you and talk about community health and kids. You've been here now with us for a while. What are some of the things that Alexandra can do with you and CHC to address mental health? One or two things.
So
before you answer that, you had food at the church and you spent some time with us. So build on that experience.
I did. The church experience was beautiful, right? It was very inclusive. It was very open and welcome. Unlike what people might think, right, or assume with something being housed or facilitated at the church. I want to add to or piggyback on what you and Cedric were just talking about. So what we are doing, Colonel, what we can do to meet these needs is, again, I talked about how CHC is known for being the trust builder, right? And we do that because we actually go into communities and we do we call them landscape assessments. You told me, Colonel, don't use any fancy terms. We go in and we talk to people, right? We go in, but we go in through our nonprofit partners or what we call our community-based organizations because they're already there doing the work. They have the trust. We come in because we're invited. We don't go in like these big organizations or what have you and insert ourselves, right? We don't force our way in. We're invited in. And what we do is we have conversations, we have convenings. Sometimes we might have focus groups, or we call them other special terms, Cedric, like collabs or things. I won't use those because I'll get in trouble by Colonel Page. But we do those things because we want to get the information from the community. The community has the answers of what they need. They just don't necessarily know where to go to get them or how to make that happen. So we start with assessing, asking questions, gathering information. We need a baseline of where we are versus where we need to be, right? We need a current state versus a future state. So that's where we come in, get that information. We understand that to do that, there has to be some form of currency. And by currency, I don't always mean money, right? If we're in a community, Colonel, where there is food insecurity, we have the means to provide them with food that they can go back, right, for their time, their knowledge, et cetera, to share with their family, and so on. So we have those kinds of systems set up so that we can get the information and share it back, whether it be with a larger entity like a Stanford or whomever. Then we know where we're going forward from there. Also, what that does is that provides or addresses a lot of the other deterrents, right? Affordability, housing, transportation, and so on. We can't give them what we don't know they need to have. And many times they're prideful, right? They might be ashamed to say what they want or need, or they've already told someone else and nobody's done anything about it. So that's what I meant earlier, right, about the bridging. We find out what they need, and then we help them connect with those tools and resources, even if we make sure that the organizations in the community are the ones that are giving it to or distributing to them. So that would be part of what I would say or add to what you all said in answer to that question.
Now, let me add to that. We sat in on a meeting with you and your organization with Alan Lomax and some other folk here in the city. The city is at the front end of doing the community needs assessment. Mm-hmm. Can you help us with that? Do you add value? Will you get in the way? What do you think?
Well, I've been known to get in the way, but that's because, my upbringing, Colonel, right, is that you have to be the change you want to see. And so I'm happy to get in the way or get in good trouble, right? Because there is a need here, and the need is greater than us. And if we don't start addressing these needs or really closing these gaps, it's only going to get more, right? It's only going to increase. So what I would say is we can not only help with that, but again, we can help to convene individuals, get the information. We can look at the information you already have. We do asset mapping, right? So that's a fancy term for, okay, asset mapping is if we know that there is a neighborhood in Alexandria where there's transportation issues. Asset mapping for us would be, okay, where are the transportation issues? Who provides transportation? How can we get these individuals, parents, teens, caretakers, group home leaders, et cetera, right? Because we have to be more inclusive in our talking and thinking. It's not just the parents that are taking care of these individuals. Sometimes it's the grandparent. It could be an auntie. It could be a big mama, right? It could be a single dad. So we have to be more inclusive, because the more inclusive we can be in how we communicate and think through this, the more we're going to be able to close those gaps. It's not just a single mom, right? Or the mom or the parent taking care of the child. It could be that group home leader, right? It could be that person that's the case manager, caseworker. So what I would say is, let's take a look at what information you have. Let's identify what information we need to gather to get what we need. And then let's put a plan together, realizing that we're not going to solve this in isolation. So we're going to have to bring together others, whether it be at the community level, right? Whether it be at the healthcare system level. We need politicians, right, to step in and to put things in place with advocacy and policy to make this easier for us to do the work. So I would say those would be some of the most immediate things that we could do, and do also at CHC to help bridge these gaps and close these issues.
Okay. So a couple questions in the chat. I'm watching them come through. I'll come back to those questions. Cedric, you are not very familiar with us here in Alexandria. What I'd like to do is introduce you to our medical leaders in the city on a separate call, and then let them pick your brain for who you know. One of the things that's personal to me is finding that next generation of health providers. Are we working with the right schools in Nova? Does Howard University have any resources that we can tap into? So for both of you, you have magnificent boards. You've got high-powered guys on your boards. Before we leave today, I'd like for you to kind of run through your mind in this local area. Is it Johns Hopkins? Is it George Mason? Is it First National Bank? Because at the end of the day, it takes resources and connections to make a difference. So what we try to do is make sure that each time we have a guest, that we leave with a dance card. Like who can we contact? And you know Dr. Mance from Howard. She's a big player. We're doing work with George Mason University. So when you put all these things in the pot and stir them up, you come out with good gumbo, and that's what we're looking for today. Does that make sense to you? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for us to extend and expand that. Colonel, I'll add one thing. Believe it or not, Stanford Medicine Children's Health just spun up an employee resource group. I know it's shocking that.
What is a resource group?
Employee resource group is for any employee within the organization to come together to identify positive things, opportunities for improvement, and just sharing of knowledge and networking within each other, build each other up, get into the community to stretch, right, and meet not only the mission of the organization, but try to meet the needs of the community. And you sparked something when you said around what are we doing to prepare leaders, right? And physician leaders. That's personal to me. I'm in the field of radiology. It is still today only 2% African-American or other than in the field. So I speak at the universities here on the West Coast. I'm from Palo Alto all the way up north to Sacramento. Just introducing them to the fact that there is a specialty within the physician, and it's called radiology, right? And there's a T-shirt that says, I am them. While I am them. While I am not a physician, they all work for me. But if I had to do it all over again, I was a radiologic technologist, I would have went to medical school and all of that. So I agree with the concept that we do need to do more, and we have to at least combine our resources to reach more.
Let me stop. I just got a question in the chat. How does race play a role for both of you in addressing mental health? I'll go with you first, Cedric. Or does it play a role?
It does play a role. I think the social determinants of health, when you start to break that down, you'll look at the statistics around ethnic groups. And while it won't be startling to some, it will be for most. Stanford, and I'm sure all other large-scale organizations, have identified in specific research programs and committees that target specific races. I will say that it has been a priority for Stanford Medicine Children's Health for the last 5 years. And it was a top priority for our CEO, Paul King, who is the first African-American CEO at Stanford Medicine Children's Health. And so I think it plays a big role if we start thinking about all of the issues we talked about earlier in the social ills, and we break it down by race, we'll find out some startling numbers, and it'll direct us to where we need to focus all our efforts.
Does that include gender too?
100%.
Okay. Another question, then I'll come back to you. You mentioned social, what was the group you mentioned, the employee resource group?
Employee resource group.
I just got a question about that. How can employees work with families and mental health?
Actually, so we just are established, one of our primary objectives is, as I said, the community. But what we found was employees have family members that are going and experiencing behavioral challenges, and they come to work every day and they don't feel like they have the resources of the platform to get them some help, to convey to their employer that I have a family member that needs help, because it'll be reflective on their job. So our focus is to understand, build trust. I'll go back to what Andrea said. Building trust within this group allows that open door to have a conversation around what are your family needs? Are there resources that they are unaware of? And can we direct them and provide for them sources to get them help? There is the last thing I'll say on that is I think there's a mandate for all large healthcare organizations based on a ruling in 2021 around increasing the resources and the allotment in terms of insurance coverage for mental behavior. It should have doubled. Hopefully people on the call and or any one of your staff members will say, I do recall back in the day, if I did try to get some resources, I was only allowed it, I'll throw a number out, 5 a month, and now it's 10 a month. Those are sessions and visits in which a child or a family member could visit.
You mentioned healthcare providers. You're talking Kaiser Permanente. Who are you talking? What organization?
It's across the board. So I'm well familiar with Kaiser Permanente because they were named in this approach to, are we doing enough? And the statistics say we are not. And that translated to it when I got to here at Stanford Medicine Children's Health, it's the same mandate. So I think it's across the board in all large.
Is that an ongoing push to get them to be more contributed to?
I actually think it comes up in Congress for a vote every other year to assess whether they are making headway with the improvements behind it. That's my last understanding of what it is. Each individual hospital is creating their own, even though Congress says and mandates through a bill and a law, this is how many. All large healthcare organizations are creating their own, and oftentimes it's way more than.
Are you connected with Inova here in this area?
I was when I was Kaiser Permanente in that area. I still have resources and leaders there, but I'm not on any of their committees and such.
And nothing here in Alexandria. You're not connected at all with us here in Alexandria, correct? You are
not
now.
Yet. Not yet.
Yeah. So check your connection button in a few minutes. You'll be automatically dialed in.
Noted.
Colonel, may I add to what CW shared with regards to supporting the employees? I'm an HR practitioner since 1996, right? Before it was called HR, right? Cedric, you know where I'm going with this, right? Back then it was called
I
personnel.
absolutely do.
And we didn't have much back then. What I would add to what Cedric said is a few things. One, most employers or a lot of employers provide EAP services. So EAP is usually, Colonel, a toll-free phone number, a web app, and or some other technology-based offering that employees and families may use for medical needs, regardless if it's mental health or what have you. You can ask and answer questions. You can get connected to resources. You can just vent and scream if that's what you need to do. So that's one thing I would encourage people to look into. The other thing I would encourage them to look into is what their actual benefits package looks like. For example, what is your PTO, sick leave, etc. Don't be afraid to use those days. I am speaking from experience. I am guilty. This year might be the first year in my entire working career that I will probably use all of my PTO days. And I don't say that with a badge of honor. I say that because, as Cedric said, I was in environments where I knew it would be held against me, right? If I said, hey, I need to do this, or I need to take care of my son, or guess what? I'm really from the bathroom of the hospital right now, because if I told you my son was in the hospital for 3 weeks, you probably would pull me off of this big project or not allow me to move forward with the promotion. So I would say look into your benefits package and see what you can leverage and use. I would also say there are organizations like NAMI, right, that provide toll-free phone numbers. They have local groups, resources, things of that nature that people can tap into for mental health specifically. You have ARC, right? If you have someone who has special needs or even not, sometimes in some areas, ARC is national. They have chapters. They provide focus groups, support groups. Ask your school, daycare, and church. That is part of their social responsibility, is to provide this type of information to you. Sometimes they don't know how or when, right? And if they don't have it, make them go get it. That's part of their job, right? Is to do those kinds of things. Ask your local first responders, your police department, right? Your chief of police, your sheriff, all of those folks should definitely know. Your health department, right? Your community services board. There are so many resources that people can tap into. Most of the ones I just named for you cost absolutely nothing other than your time. The other thing I would say, piggybacking off of Cedric's ERG group, employee resource group, sometimes they're called different things in different organizations. Leverage those groups, because if you're not seeing what you need or getting what you need from your employer, those groups are a great way or platform or mechanism to ask the employer to provide them. Also, what I would say too is look into your volunteerism program. We do volunteerism employee engagement programs through CHC. And what that means, Colonel Page, is like an ERG for a Stanford or some other organization would work with CHC to create what we call a volunteerism or employee engagement project. That might be what we call it Break with a Purpose, which is where it's maybe 45 minutes to an hour. We have a mental health expert that comes in and talks to the group about whatever they want to talk about. It is unscripted. It is safe. People can get information that they need in order for them to actually be more productive, right? To not be afraid to show up or say what they need to their boss and so on. So there are a bunch of different ways that we can address the needs of the caretaker. And let's be mindful that a lot of people like myself are in that sandwich generation. We are caring for a child and or children and an aging parent or grandparent. And we need to be especially give those folks a lot more space and grace, because that is a whole nother job in addition to the job they're performing. We can do things too, Colonel, like be flexible with schedules if possible, right? Because I can tell you, if you have a child like I had at one time where he is not sleeping at all, he is up 24 hours. Right. And I have to make sure that he is safe and he is not, eloping or running away or doing any of those other things. Yeah, I had to show up at work, but it would have been really nice, right, if I could have come in a little bit later or taken off that day, but I couldn't for fear of what my employer would or wouldn't do. So I'm just saying that I hope that what Cedric shared and what I was hopefully able to add on provides some resources to, I think the person's name was Clarence in North Carolina, around the caretaking abilities and what the employers can do.
Let me stop you. One thing that I have to be careful of is when we have guests, we could talk all day because mental health is such a powerful and passionate issue. But part of your new partnership agreement is to send us 10 solid tips just around taking care of kids, whatever those are, so that we can have that as a handout. Because, in my opinion, you just can't talk about kids without talking about parents.
Mhm.
So the whole thing is a whole family approach. So what I'm asking for you to do is look at those things that you're doing specifically that we can post into our report that says at Stanford we're doing this, at CHC we want to do that, on and on and on. But let me come back to another issue. We're talking about you being a single parent. You said single parent, and the difficulty in doing that. That's a huge issue with in our community. So part of your pushback, give us some thoughts on how you dealt with that. And before you answer that, I want you to give about 30 seconds on your time at the church and how you left there, please.
Sure. So the funny story, Cedric, and everyone else, is that I have self-diagnosed anxiety, right? And my therapist says it's okay as long as it doesn't impact my daily living, right? Or these critical things I need to get done. Well, I was so anxious that morning to get to the church on time, I put my dress on backwards, and I had to stop at the gas station to turn my dress around before I kept going to get there on time, right? Cedric, I see you nodding your head. It's true. I'm a human, right? I'm not a robot. So I will admit that. I got a couple of laughs about that at the church, right? Just to show that I am real. Yeah. But what I will say is that the church experience was that. It was an experience. It was inclusive. It was welcoming. It was non-judgmental. Everybody there was there to learn. We had one purpose that day. And the one purpose was, if we can reach one person, just one, we've done our job.
How do you think you did? How do you think you did?
I don't know how I did per se, but I think collectively, I think we achieved that agenda. What I also will say is that there were people there, right, from the police department. There were people there, right, from the health department. People want to provide help and support and services. It's just that in some communities and some cultures, we have been programmed to not trust these people. And so part of what I think you're doing, Colonel, with the church and CCNA is breaking down those barriers, right? Removing those silos so that people can come together no matter what they look like, no matter what language they speak, no matter how significant their issue is. Because we heard some powerful stories there, right? What I'll say I took away with this, don't ever judge somebody by how they look, because you really don't know what they've been through.
Let me give you some kudos. You keep saying CCNA. Thank you for that. But it goes way beyond that. We've got some great community partners. You know, we have a health, Alan Lomax, Jean Mahan, Kate Garvey, the mayor. They're all in this together. And what we try to do is make sure that our 59 minutes with you gives us even more stuff to deal with. So I'm always looking for that extra screwdriver or wrench to go into our toolbox. That makes sense to you?
Sure, absolutely.
I'm looking at the chat. Cedric, can you see the chat?
I can.
Talk to me.
Cultural attitudes and the stigma around mental health vary, and what can we learn from different approaches? I think that the first comment that I have is, I think that's why they have changed, and certainly we still say mental health, and there's a shift to call it behavioral health and behavioral changes, trying to demystify the stigma around mental health and what in historic days and thoughts around what that really means. Certainly in the work area, as Andrea said, Colonel, you and I both know in the military, that was also a stigma that could have been attached to someone and could affect that. But I think we can do more around that is just continue to dispel the myth. Be transparent. Andrea just did a perfect job of that, right? Transparency breaks down barriers, right? If I'm open enough to share a story that could be and is embarrassing, but when I share that, it connects oftentimes with other people who have that same story and are afraid or reluctant or have a bit of anxiety about sharing that for purposes of being judged or judgmental, right? So I think we as leaders, and all of us are leaders, need to take a part in sharing what challenges we have had in life. if you're open to it, if you're comfortable with it, if you see a therapist like Andrea and I, right, what you'll realize is we can help more people by being transparent. And I think that's what a move in an organization, not just healthcare, but I think all organizations, the leaders are being taught that transparency has to be in your top 3 qualities of a leader. And so I think there's a movement to do that. What I do know is kids will pick up on it just like that, especially young men. If you tell them you're going to do something, do it. But then when you are in front of them, they will pick up right away in 10 seconds or less if you're being honest and transparent or not. The first thing I do when I speak to young men is I tell a story that was difficult for me and or something I had to overcome.
Are you comfortable sharing a brief story?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm from Houston, Texas, as I shared, right? As most people know, Texas is a sports fanatic state. And I played sports, but I was very shy, and you can't be a leader in being shy. My mom, rest her soul, made my brother and I sing in the choir until we were 18 years old. True story, Colonel. I sung in the choir and never looked up until I was 17 years old. So from 5 years old to 17, I sung because I would get in trouble if I didn't get up in that choir and sing, but I never looked up in the audience. And my mom said to me, "You're not going to be successful in life, son, if you don't pick your head up and always speak. You don't have to be right all the time, right? Just when someone says, I'm not sure that's right, hear it." And then, of course, I joined the military, and my first job was human resources, Andrea, and I had to do lectures every day. So I think it goes back to being transparent and telling, kids and leaders and even adults, right, what are some of your challenges? And that was one of mine.
So is mentoring part of your portfolio?
Mentoring is part of who I am. I believe I am where I am today, and I have much farther to go because of the people that have poured and mentored me along the way. Their ask, every single one of them, was that I mentor people the same and or better than they did me. And so I've been doing that, at least from CW's mindset, ever since I was 24 years old. Now that I'm retired military, but still have another job, I do it on the job, and I still have connections within the community of at least 3 people I mentor.
I take military privilege and acknowledge your relationship with Raul Andrews as your mentor. You want to give him a shout
100%. And that's what brought me here today, right? It was mentorship. And Raul is a phenomenal person, leader. And I think what I like to say about him that he doesn't accept is that humanity that he has, and he shares like instinctively all the time, always willing to help people. He will pick up on things that you need that you're not saying, and then send you a text, send you an email, make a phone call to someone else to have them connect through you. And so that's how I know mentorship is without question for me, at least one pillar that can change the world for the better. And that's why I submit to it as much as I can.
Apologies to the audience. Raul is the exec director of APAF. We're good friends, and they tell us don't mention somebody without putting it in context, but he's a very powerful leader, and he's a connector. That's how, Andrea, you got here, is through Raul and that connection. You had a meeting, Andrea, with a bunch of us here in the city about a community health assessment plan. It was a great meeting. You guys did for thinking, wow, this is good stuff. But when you went back to the office with you and Jean, what was the point? What was the summary of the conversation? Talk to me.
Yeah, so what I think is important to mention, and part of the answer, Colonel, is that even though behavioral health, mental health, whatever we call it, right, health in general can be a very serious, heavy, sensitive topic, but we infuse humor, we infuse fun, right? We have fun, but we get work done. And I think that's really important, particularly as we continue to address a lot of these very serious challenges or issues that we have or will have going forward. Mm-hmm. But I will also say, too, that we need to have the right people, right, in the room having the right conversations. And when I say that, I mean, Gene and I were talking, Dr. Jackson and I were talking about everything from systems change, which requires, right, politicians, right, leaders at various levels across the city or even across the state for that matter, or even at the federal level. We need to have the boots on the ground people in the communities, right, that are doing the work or even that want to or aspire to do the work. That crosses generations, that crosses cultural norms, right? That crosses, that means everybody can be a part of this, no matter what educational background you have, right? No matter what your zip code is. What we say is that your zip code should not be a death sentence. And that's what we want to see in Alexandria and beyond, is that we have so many resources and tools. We need to get the right people in the right room to make these things happen and to take place, or we're going to be having this conversation in, I don't know, another year or 5 years from now.
So the conversation with Alexandria folk was good for you guys?
It was good for our soul, right? Because this is hard and heart work, and we get a lot of no's, right? We get a lot of no's or a lot of negativity, right? Or what we can't do. And being amongst that group of people, we focused only on what we can and will accomplish and what we want to get done. And we said that we're not going to let any barrier, silo, political affiliation, we're not going to let any of that stuff or noise get in our way, right? We're going to make Alexandria and other areas better than we found it.
I'm going to hold you to that. Cedric, you just saw the comment about vets. Talk to me, your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough conversation for me. What I think we can do is start each person. So Colonel knows this, and I'll just say it. No one left behind, right? That's in the military, it's in our communities, but the true essence of no one left behind is when we know or become aware of someone that needs help, it is our charge. I will say duty, but I'll say charge for the conversation of here in broad scale. It is our charge to ensure that we continue to communicate and persist in that person getting some help. I'll give you an example at Stanford Medicine Children's Health. And I've been dealing with this kind of since 2005 when I retired. Veterans are reluctant to put on an application that they are a veteran because there was historically a stigma behind that. Every organization should be, human resources, should be dispelling that myth by communicating the reason that question is on the application. And the leaders of the organization, particularly veterans, should be communicating throughout their organizations to say, the reason we want to identify you as a veteran is there are certain programs and causes to support veterans that you may not know about, and we won't know unless you self-identify. I did that in Kaiser within the confines of privacy, Andrea. They would give me a list of people who either marked on the application, meaning there's a dash or a slash meant they wanted to answer it in some kind of way, but felt reluctant. There are veteran resource groups in many of the organizations. I think we personally, all of us are leaders. I believe every person that is living and breathing has some capacity to lead and should. And so I think we should reach out to all veterans. And what we know to be true is once we connect with one or two, then they'll come out and then celebrate veterans, right? Not just on Veterans Day, right? Or Armed Forces Day, if you are fortunate enough to have that in your organization. But create an organization for veterans within the hospital organization that you work or any organization in which you work. The business resource groups typically will have a veterans group. The ERG or employee resource group will typically have a veterans group. And I think being active in having movements and objectives in those groups, I think is very effective.
Guys, one thing that I want to do is make sure that our audience can connect with you personally. So we'll put in if you don't mind, your direct information, how they can get in touch with you and when you'll be in town. Cedric, you'll be in town in September.
Yes.
In September.
Absolutely.
So we'll have you over for grits and something in September and introduce you to some people. Andrea, we've got several people on the line. And to make it easy for you, I see Alan was on the line. Tell Alan what you and John want to do with him. Just
sure.
just say, Alan, this is what we want to do with Alexandria. And I guarantee
Sure.
he's listening. I know him. He's listening.
Yeah, well, the first thing, Alan gives really good hugs. So, just from social isolation, right? Cedric is an issue, right? And we know that human touch is important to address behavioral mental health needs. So, Alan, first of all, you kind of set the precedent of giving hug when you see me. So I kind of expect that now going forward, appropriately, of course. But what I would say is let's take a look at the assessment that they have now, Colonel, and any other future assessments that they plan. And let's see again where they're meeting expectation, right, or even exceeding expectation, because that's something that we can share across Alexandria or beyond. And then also, where do we see some areas of opportunity, some gaps where we can connect, right, or plug those in, or intersect, or connect people with what people need. I think, though, we also need to be mindful of the future. What the assessment tells us today may not be, right, Cedric, what is needed in even the next 6 months, year, et cetera. So I think we need to be forward thinking and generative thinking in the planning process. And again, bringing and convening the people that we know can do the work today, but also that can do it tomorrow. That's where I think a lot more of the youth or the non-traditional players come in, is because they typically have different, bold, audacious goals and ideas that we may not know of or think of, right? They might be working on an app or something that we can bring in to help close these gaps. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we can continue to build on the inclusivity, right, and the equitable experience for everybody.
One thing you can do to help us, I know that Jen, your boss, and CW are friends. If you could include them on your conversation, it'll make his trip here even more productive when he comes to town. So we got about 2 more minutes. Give me some words of wisdom and thoughts as a retired Air Force Master Sergeant and a great veteran about mental health in kids.
I think mental health in kids, right, is one of the single most important issues, challenges, and what I like to say opportunities for us in society. What we do know is the kids are our future, right? If we devote time to meeting them where they are, I think the effort around whether we have a psychologist and a social worker prescribe, if you will, a care plan for them is one thing. Where I think the connection, i.e., as referenced earlier, the bridge is we being open to listen to where they are without judgment. Also being persistent about the care and need for them, right? What I've experienced is the fact that they feel like no one cares enough, and sometimes it's not at all, right? Or enough. That's where we need to focus our time. Committed, just like we commit to work, just like we commit to whatever our favorite activity is, whether that's working out, entertainment, you name it. Commit at least several hours a week to kids, and whether it's your kids or the youth or whatever volunteerism you're doing, commit and be persistent on doing that. So first of all, just showing up. If you show up consistently for them, that'll open the door for transparency, and they'll share, and we'll find out what the needs are.
A couple of things I'd like to leave you with. One, I'm just using this as a broad figure. Our population here is about 160,000 people in Alexandria. That's kind of the baseline number. But our zip codes extend south, north, east, and west. So just because you live here, you could work here. So we have a very extended population. What I'd like for you to do, Andre, with your permission, is let's look at that Venn diagram that says we got this number of people, and in this circle, there's this number of kids. And then how do we, like a laser focus, start to take care of that number of kids? What are the 5 or 6 programs that can address those kids? And then who in your network can give us help in addressing that, whether it's homelessness, obesity, diabetes, any of those things. So I'd like to develop kind of this vision, 50,000 foot view of our children, where they're from, what they do, all the things, so that when we're having a conversation across the city, it's not just Dr. Rose in the health department or Kate Garvey. It's everybody who sees a role in taking care of these kids, good, bad, or indifferent. When you can do that, then it gives me personally a sense of ownership. When you walk into a room and they're thinking about me, the young kid from Somalia, or from Guatemala, so that they feel inclusive. So part of the thing we're doing in Alexandria right now is celebrating 275 years of being a great city. I think we can add to that by building a matrix that says, we see you, young guy from Houston, Texas, Second Ward. We see you, confused Cowboy fan, in your case, Cedric. So
as long as you see me.
Yeah. So we're coming to a close, but I really want to make sure that for this session that I'm true to the audience and that we're going to provide some more tips, some more connections, and build our network. So I know that we now have a partnership with CHC. We're official community partners. Cedric, I invite you to come in as a friend, participate in what we do, and learn what we're trying to do, because it's a big deal. It's a huge deal. And everybody, not everybody, the leaders in this city are committed to doing something for our kids. The short pole in the tent is, or the long pole is, what can we do? If I'm the Secretary of Transportation, how does that affect mental health? Does homelessness affect mental health? What role does ACPS, our school system, play? What role does voting play? Or does it play a role? Do we care? I'm a nonprofit. We don't support anybody, but we do push education. When do you start mentoring kids? When do you have an adult conversation about mental health? We've got about 2 minutes left. I'm going back to you, Cedric. If you were in the military, you didn't talk about mental health. Nope. You just
did not.
You salute it, load your bullets up, and just keep rolling.
That's right.
Yeah. But now, with folk like you holding your head up, Andrea sharing your personal story, and being part of our community, I'm going to take citizenship pride and say, you're both very, very welcome to our community. Very welcome. We're having a reception for your boss in a couple of weeks. That reception is for you to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and then come with a blank sheet of paper and leave with a piece of paper filled out. So I'm going to give each one of you a chance to say goodbye. We got about a minute left, and I'm going to be Andrea, please say goodbye, and we'll start, please.
Well, first, thank you. I don't take the opportunity to even speak to one person about how they can live their healthiest life for granted. So thank you very much. And for even putting us together here with CW. I like that better. So I'll adopt that. I think what I would say is that I'm very easy to find. I'm on LinkedIn, right? The CHC website has my picture on there. Yeah, I'm a little today, but it's got all my contact information on there. I promise you, if you reach out to CHC, anybody will get you in contact with me, right? We want to hear from everybody. There's the flyer right there. And I'll hear from anyone. I'll convene one person, 1,000 people. We can't do this in isolation. I will say that my dad, who passed in my son in my care Thanksgiving morning of 2022, left me with one thing. My life is in service to others, and I will do everything in my ability to live out his legacy by fulfilling that requirement, or as Cedric said, that charge that I have been given to make sure that others, I like to call it this, Colonel, the have-nots have. If I've done that and I've done my job, I'm here, I'm happy, I'm blessed and fortunate to be able to do this work. And I invite any and everybody to join us, but we can't do it if we don't hear from you. So please let me know how I can help and support.
Welcome home, Cedric, sir.
I first of all want to say also thank you for this opportunity. Andrea, your father is proud and know you are living out his legacy. I think we all have an opportunity to give more. The youth need us, and they need us to be transparent. They need us to be consistent. And they need us to show up in a way that is believable. So I would ask that of everyone within the sound of my voice. And then thirdly, I am on the West Coast for work, but my home is on the East Coast. So when I'm back there, as the Colonel know, but all of you, anyone reach out to me, I will show up, make every effort I can to do that. And I think wellness needs to be the priority for the next 5 years. But not only us, the youth, but the entire world and society. So we should be dead set on getting that done in the various ways and resources that we have.
Thank you for joining us. Cedric, you'll get an email from me with a credit card number. The credit card is from Alan Lomax, so feel free to use his credit card for anything you want to do. He'll understand. Let me close out with just a couple comments. First, to you two guys, thank you for joining us. Always good to have you in the room. To our audience, we do this twice a month, and we're glad that you're able to join us today. This will be on the website. Obviously, mental health for our families is a passion, and this is a joint effort. So stay tuned to CCNA. We'll keep you posted, and you're always welcome to join us on any Saturday morning every other Saturday morning from 11 o'clock until noon on YouTube, STEM City. So with that, I'll say thank you for joining us this morning, and have a good weekend.